Welcome to the Leadership Reckoning Room, the space where leaders are brave enough to look in the mirror and do the real work. I'm Steph, and today we light the lantern with someone who has illuminated the way I think about growth and human potential, and what it means to lead young people with the insight and care that helps them rise to their fullest potential. David Yeager is a professor of psychology at UT Austin, one of the world's leading researchers on adolescent development, and the author of the national bestseller, 10 to 25, The Science of Motivating Young People, a book that frames a groundbreaking approach to leading the next generation and how leaders can better understand the most formative years of a person's life and the leaders we become because of them. His work has influenced educators, policymakers, parents, and anyone who cares about how humans learn, struggle, and rise. But titles aren't why he's here. David is one of the most clear-sighted, humble, and rigorously hopeful thinkers that I know. A researcher who refuses easy narratives, a storyteller who brings science to life without losing its soul, a leader who invites us to see people not as fixed, but as becoming, always becoming. David is the kind of scientist who makes you feel more human, the kind of teacher who makes you braver, and the kind of leader who reminds us that evidence and empathy are not opposites, they're companions in the work of helping people thrive. So take a breath, set down whatever certainty you walked in with, and step into the reckoning with us. David, I'm so happy you're here. I know how busy you are touring the world and giving talks with your book. And I'm so honored that, first of all, that I know you and that we have this connection and this passion around lifting others, especially the younger generations, and helping the older generations understand the differences and how they need to approach the younger generations. But the fact that you took time to talk with us today, I couldn't be more excited, and I can't wait for everybody to hear everything about what you're doing and about the book and about your apps and about coaching baseball and all the things that you do. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
One of the first things that I'd love to just talk about a little bit is that, so you and I met years ago, and we've stayed connected since the very first time we met. We had this kind of spark between us of passion. And it was after you had met with Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. And I think Kathleen Hogan was in there. I think Carol Dweck was with you in that meeting. And you had talked to him and proposed a project in working with Microsoft on one of your ideas. And that project eventually came to me, and that's how we met. So maybe just tell us a little bit about that initial project.
Yeah, thanks. So I, as a psychologist, I'm constantly looking for the wisdom of practice as it has already been developed. And then what we sometimes do is we look at great practices that already exist that people are using, and we say, all right, how do we now distill the essence of these and turn it into something where we can test rigorously, so that way we can spread great work to others. And at the time, I was conducting what we'd call a bright spots analysis. And so in education, that would be, for example, identifying the teachers who best improve the learning outcomes of their students relative to what you'd expect based on prior knowledge about those students. So if the stats would have said your students have a 30% chance of succeeding and some teacher gets 90% to succeed, that's like an outlier. And so I've been looking for these bright spots in different fields, in PhD mentoring, so like astrophysics, in high school teaching, in professional sports. And I was doing this in part with Carol Dweck, and I thought, well, let's find that in management. And I knew that Microsoft had adopted growth mindset as a philosophy. And the premise was, first, could we identify growth mindset bright spots already at Microsoft? So the idea is, if it's like your philosophy is growth mindset, presumably there are some people who really run with that philosophy and do it well, and other people who maybe do it in name only, right? Or reject it outright. So could we identify the bright spots, and then could we figure out what they're doing and saying? And at the time I thought was, well, there are certain mindset moments in a person's life or in a person's day where your language about ability or potential would really come out. And I thought one such moment might be performance evaluations, or what you call the Connect at the time. And I was like, they have to be on Teams because this is COVID, and therefore they have to be transcribed. So you definitely have text transcripts of performance evaluations, and the managers who 2 years after that performance evaluation, their person has left or quit or been recruited away versus the person who retained the young,
Right.
employees. And so I was like, and so he thought to love this idea. And the idea was we would basically learn from the transcripts, and then we could train AI models to coach humans on better performance evaluations. So rather than me and like nerd in the ivory tower going to Microsoft and saying, here's how you should do performance evaluations, like, you don't work at Microsoft. Why do we care what you say? Instead, it'd be like, no. Let's just find what's already working at your organization and codify the wisdom of your existing people and use that to train or mentor maybe your newly promoted managers, right? And that was the idea. So this won't surprise you, but that idea that all the leadership loved and the scientists loved turned into 1,000 meetings with lawyers who eventually killed the project. And so all we ended up with, our cookie crumb, was that we had gotten far enough along to identify you as one of these bright spot outliers. And you personally agreed to talk to me while Microsoft's lawyers twiddled their thumbs and they went off and did nothing. And I don't blame Satya. He apparently was checking in on the project all the time, but it did die, and it is annoying. But I am glad that I met you.
Yeah, I'm so thankful because, honest to God, like from the first conversation, I was like, I swear we talked for a couple of hours. Like it was, and we're like, okay, we are not letting this go. We are keeping this connection alive. And I think what's kind of crazy is when you just described that, and from what I remember that project being, it is so much like the AI manager AI tools that are out now. You were the forerunner in that. Like you had that idea before anybody else ever developed them. And that's exactly what it was going to be, is like an AI coach for managers, real time.
Yeah, the idea was to use technology to help humans be better at being human,
right?
Not to replace humans.
That's exactly right.
And then the other thought was that the efficiency of having your bright spot managers train the rest of your managers is really in question in a lot of organizations, because if you're a top manager, you're probably also really, really good at not wasting time.
Yeah.
And so like your time is spoken for the most part, because you're giving it to people, your direct reports, maybe even, if it's you, it's people that are not even your direct reports anymore you're meeting with. Sometimes you're even mentoring your skip boss, but you're also an individual contributor.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense really for your top managers that are producing tons of value and that you don't want to burn out, to have them spend all their time teaching novice managers who were previously just programmers and never had a feeling in their life and never talked to another person in their life. And now all of a sudden they're in charge of a team, and you have to get them up to a basic level of competence as a manager. So that's what you currently do as a company. It makes no sense. Or you're just okay with mediocre managing.
Yeah.
And so we're like, what if you could codify an AI where it's not inconvenient to the AI to have to explain basic stuff, and you're not inconveniencing the top managers, but you're still transmitting 80 to 90% of what might have been transmitted in a human coaching situation.
Right. And then those bright spot managers or leaders could then focus on lifting maybe those new managers in a different way versus just teaching the basics.
Exactly, right. They would do the 10% that no one could do.
Right.
Now, this idea is still viable to me. I don't think anyone's done it well yet, but the trick and the reason why it really became hard is that the devil's in the details.
Yeah.
Because novices who don't have an ear for mentoring could look at a transcript and be like, that looks growth mindset to me. And, they'd be like, well, they talk about effort and they talk about persisting and not giving up, right? Or they're like troubleshooting with the person who screwed up. And so that's good. But if you really listen to a great mentor, or, someone who really embodies growth mindset management, it's not like a glib catchphrase for them. And the analogy I like to use sometimes is, like suppose, and this is a real example so we had a hackathon with Microsoft where a bunch of engineers were like, we're going to train the AI just based on what we know about growth mindset with no training transcripts.
Right.
We're just going to do it ourselves. So not getting the transcripts of the top managers, but just given what we think about growth mindset, let's have an AI algorithm. And it was very much like, I'm so glad you tried hard, or wait, great effort. Don't give up, keep persisting, or, let's try something different, see how it goes. And eventually growth mindset leaders say some of that stuff. But the first thing a great growth mindset leader, or we'll get to, mentor mindset leader does, is they check how the person is doing.
Yeah.
It's like the first thing they do.
Absolutely.
Right. And the analogy, just getting back to the analogy I was going to say, is like, imagine your friend called you and said, my husband's cheating on me and has left me. And your first thing you said to them is, well, walk me through what you're going to do differently in your next marriage. Like, that's not the time. But like, you could imagine an engineer coding the transcript of that phone call and being like, growth mindset, let's train the algorithm, have growth mindset advice. Right. And that's what it's going to do. And like, that's pretty inhumane. You know, the first thing would be like, oh my God, are you okay? Right.
Absolutely.
So that's just kind of where you can't like automate abstract psychological principles into AI without involving the humanity of people that have made relationships work before. And that's the hard work of actually fine-tuning AI models. And no one is doing that because there's such a hurry to rush to market.
Right.
And so that's why almost all the products, in my opinion, are crap. And it's just total waste of like billions of dollars. And it's like not going to help anybody. Not because AI is a dumb idea, like in every case, but because people aren't doing the actual hard work to make it great at addressing these human concerns.
Oh, that's so critically important. And it's something I talk about all the time, right? It's just, like you said, that race to be first is sacrificing what if you went a little bit slower to make sure that human piece was there, would create something far better that would be like have way more longevity in the market. And I know that you're working on a mentor mindset, and we haven't even talked about the mentor mindset yet, but we will. And maybe we can talk about the mentor mindset AI app that you're creating that kind of goes alongside everything that you've just said and all the research that you've done, as well as all the work that you put into your amazing book, 10 to 25. I recommend this book everywhere to everybody. And you can see how much I have gone through it and use it. And I cherish it because it creates a foundational approach of exactly what you're talking about. The mentor mindset is really not lowering the standards, your standards for people. It's raising the standards, but them knowing that you are right there with them through all of it. And it's everything. It works. I try and do that with everybody in my team. So maybe, and one thing I want to say about 10 to 25, the science of motivating young people that you wrote, is that it's amazing that it covers leadership and in general as a foundation of what's critically important when you're lucky enough to lead others, whether that be in a corporate setting, coaching sports, in a classroom as a parent. So when you think about the years between 10 and 25, what makes this period so powerful and so misunderstood? Maybe we can just start there.
I call the book 10 to 25, as you know, because it's the age range between the onset of puberty, which is around age 10 for most kids, and then the offset of adolescence, which is the adoption of an adult-like role in our culture, which happens around 25. So there's a biological onset of adolescence that's driven by hormones and brain changes, and a cultural offset because, there were periods in human history where you were an adult at 16.
Yeah.
And in 20 years, it might be 30. And so the main argument is that anywhere in that age range, people don't yet have the status and respect that they're craving, that maybe their bodies are ready for. And it could be for a variety of reasons, but they're not yet afforded the status and respect that they most want. And because of that disparity between what people want and how they feel, then they're really attuned to communications that could be an affront to their status and respect. And we all have heard the experience of, a kid who mom says, don't forget your coat. And the kid's like, why would I forget my coat? And they're offended. And it's because they're interpreting it as a threat to their competence and their independence rather than as my mom loves me.
Yeah.
And that's a simple version. But then now fast forward to an employee at, a Fortune 500 company. You used to be a top performer in your college. You got hired at this great company. Now your first performance review lists 30 things that you're not doing well. And you're like, well, how dare you treat me this way, et cetera. And it's not because you're like entitled necessarily. It's because you are deeply craving the reputation of someone who has competence and is worthy of respect in this organization. And so the 10 to 25 is like a lens for pointing out the value of these social motives, status and respect, and how much we need to pay attention to them. But of course, it's not constrained to that age range because these are things we want throughout life. And so why didn't I call it 10 to infinity? And it's like, well, because once you have a powerful adult-like role in our culture, then you get to take certain stuff for granted a lot. Like no one asked me if I deserve the right to talk uninterrupted for 20 minutes because I'm a professor and it's my job is to do that.
I get paid to do that. Yeah.
Like I do it all the time, whereas like if my 10-year-old talks uninterrupted for 20 minutes, everyone's like, it's 19 minutes too long, And so like I get to take for granted a lot of things. Like I go to a store and I just have a disagreement with someone who works there. Like the default explanation is that I'm right, and like that's totally unfair, but like that's how power works in our culture. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not offended if someone asks me if I have a coat, because I don't think someone thinks I'm incompetent, and I say that because I think that the book is meant for managers and leaders of all types, for all age groups, but especially gives us a lens for thinking about generational issues like Gen Z and Gen Alpha and what's going on with them.
Right. It's interesting. Two things that I'll kind of combine into one is that the younger generations, they want something different than what even my generation wanted or needed. Not that I'm archaic, but I mean, listen, I am. So, but when I was early in career, I just needed a job. I wanted a secure paycheck. Like you go to Boeing and you work at Boeing for your whole life. Or, I had a really long tenure at Microsoft, which I'm very, very proud of. But even at Microsoft, the expectation was that you would move around a lot and gather different skills and keep growing and moving it. You wouldn't just sit idle and, kind of rest, invest, or just work towards retiring at a company. I think that today, meaning and respect, learning and growth are prioritized over just having a job. Like the early in career that I've worked with, they want to know that what they're working on means something to the world and as well as to the company's goals of what the company is trying to reach as a whole. And they'll leave if they're not getting what they need.
And I think there's a whole generation of managers who've concluded that that's the definition of entitlement.
Right. And it's not.
And it's like they're used to the world that we grew up in where you trade your 20s and mid to early 30s in return for compensation.
Right.
And or the chance to do what you really want to do in your late 30s and 40s and 50s. And it's like viewed as a fair exchange that like they get to own a decade and a half of your life and then you get to enjoy your life later.
Right.
And if you want to enjoy your life during that decade and a half, you do it on your own hours, not
right.
It's like the old Don Draper quote where Peggy in Mad Men, Peggy, I just want to know if my work matters or something like that. And Draper's like, that's what the money is for.
Exactly.
And that's the mentality, right?
Yeah.
But then young employees look at our generation. We're like, okay, what fills our cup? What fulfill? Like, where do we get things from? And we talk about meaning, purpose, contribution, reputation. And they're like, wait, why do I have to wait for that? And I think it's wrong to say, well, you have to quote like earn your stripes kind of thing. I definitely think people have to earn a reputation as competent. And you shouldn't do things for people and they have to do hard stuff to prove that they're valuable. But the idea you have to earn dignity, I always felt was weird. Like, why is that true?
Yeah. It's, and Boy, because that's a shadow that's followed me my whole career, right? Is trying to earn the respect and be valued, understand that others value you. And so you're constantly striving towards that. Whereas, the generations now, like if they aren't getting it, they're just gonna move on. So it's important that managers, and I'll tell you, one of my favorite, those who are early in career, my favorite to lead and help grow, because they're so open to wanting to grow skills every day. It's like they demand learning. They want to learn and grow their skills in any direction they choose. And if you're lucky enough, you get to help them along that way and grow them into any careers that they want to grow to. And so I love in your book, you talk about just the, mentor mindset and high standards with high support, which really challenges the stereotypes that, like you said, today's youth are entitled and disengaged. And how has your research and all of the interviews that and conversations you've had helped with this stereotype? Because I think your book really talks about that and helps people realize, don't just label this generation as entitled. Really look to see what makes them shine, and then keep investing in them from a mentor perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I fully understand the idea that businesses have to operate as businesses and it's not charity, and that you're compensating people for the work that they're doing. But we also have to understand that we're in a labor market where, with AI taking out entry-level jobs in many industries, then the first thing employees are told is you need experience or leadership, because you have to start in the second rung, not the first rung. How are people supposed to get leadership or, quote, experience if they're not ever given the opportunity?
Right.
And certainly if they're not given like responsibility or the chance to matter when they do get a job. This is only a slight tangent, but we're working on a new project now with Wendy Kopp, who created an organization called Teach for America. That's a well-known service organization. And she's kind of a leader in American civic engagement, I guess you could say. And the shocking fact is that the proportion of graduates from top colleges who go into service has declined dramatically, and maybe by half by some numbers, compared to when my generation graduated college in 2004 or 2006. So what are they doing instead? Well, they're all going into banking and management consulting. And so you show up at Princeton and you're like, well, I won the college lottery. I did the best at getting into the top college, but so did everybody else here. So how do I then show that I'm the best again with all these new people? And then you're like, oh, well, the hardest job to get is at Lehman Brothers or whatever, like in banking or McKinsey or Bain. And so I'm going to go join the consulting club and the banking club. And that becomes the new high status thing. And the problem is, in a lot of these jobs, you're an entry-level analyst. You're not given a ton of independence and thought. And your labor, I mean, you're paid a lot temporarily, but the amount of value you create is like a lot more than what you're actually doing. So it doesn't feel like it, but you are being exploited in a lot of ways. And, but you're not getting the kind of experience that you might want for other kinds of jobs. And so you believe, oh, well, if I've been in these top jobs, I can get a job anywhere because they're so high status. But that's not necessarily the case. And one of the arguments we're trying to make is that, well, look, if you go do service and you're in charge of an entire nonprofit, at 22, well, now you've got experience, and then the challenge would be, how do you empower the mentors at these nonprofits or service organizations to embolden and grow and empower this next generation of civic leaders? So I think about that a lot, of what are the career paths that exist? How are the default ways that managers are interacting? How are they either creating or suppressing those pathways? And then once you understand the constraints young people are operating under, then maybe we have a little more compassion for how they react when we tell them to basically wait to your mid-30s to matter.
Yeah. Something that I have learned is that I didn't even know the kind of the label for it was mentor mindset, but I found that what works the most, especially when leading others, is that you give them, you may frame an idea or a project that you need done, and you talk to the, the person about it that you're hoping will take the project or want to take the project, and you frame kind of what it might be and the why behind it. And then what you do is you empower that person to go take it and run with it and give them the autonomy to be able to create it in a way that they see would be best versus just checking the box of what you think is the best way to approach it. Because listen, as leaders, and I think we talk about this in the book a little bit, as leaders, we'll always have ideas of how we think you should do it, why we think you need to do it, what it would look like. And you can give them that step by step. But instead, when you do that, you kind of get meh. And if you just say, here's what I'm thinking, this is kind of what I want the end to look like. Go and create whatever you think is best. Think outside the box, use your creativity, and then check in with me and let's see, how you're doing, and I can remove any roadblocks for you. But what that does is two things. It proves to me that as a leader that I'm better because I'm empowering others to do their best and be their best versus my ego always being at play or me wanting to have all the answers. And it empowers and grows the other person to have the confidence and know that they are valued and grow the skills that they didn't even maybe realize that they either wanted to grow or needed to grow, that sets them apart and differentiates them as they grow their career. And the project always comes back. I've said this in the book, the project always comes back 10 times better than you ever thought it could. Like your mind is 99% of the
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it feels like the biggest trade-off to people when I talk to them about this stuff. So I talked to a guy who's a top consultant for this healthcare firm, and they do like government consulting. So they'll have to be on top of whatever bills are coming in the pipeline, so that way they can give a risk assessment to healthcare companies on some new product or service or whatever. Anyway, the guy I talked to is like an amazing individual contributor, and that's why he got promoted to being the head of his division. But when he has junior analysts, he obviously knows theoretically he can get more done if he empowers people. But like when you have a pitch for a client tomorrow, and it's like 50% of your bonus depends on landing this client, are you really going to let the 25-year-old or 22-year-old do the bulk of the work? And if so, then do you think I'm being lazy or I'm out of the game?
Yeah.
Because what the strategy that's always worked for you for being a top performer is that push comes to shove, we have a big pitch, I'm going to be the lunatic who does more work and does a better job than anyone else could have done.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to mentor and coach when everything feels high stakes.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. I would never dismiss those concerns. I think it's totally legitimate. And look at professional sports. Like, what's higher stakes than how often coaches are fired and players are cut, right? But in the NBA, the best teams are the ones that mentor and develop players over multiple years. And then guess what? You have an all-star on a rookie contract that costs you $800,000 instead of $20 million a year. And then you win. And like that's literally the story of the Thunder. They were the worst team in the NBA 3 years ago. They hired the best mentor mindset coach in the world, Chip England, and they're now second year running, best team in the NBA, best shooting team, breaking all kinds of records. But they took people that others had given up on, they developed the players, and now they're stars.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because I'm in Seattle, I have to mention the Seahawks. I feel like that's kind of the story of the Seahawks recently as well, is they invest in the idea as they're working as one. It's not just, the coach or leading with ego. It's like we are working together towards this one common goal. And I think
I was on a podcast called The Glue Guys, which is it's a bunch of former athletes, or two former athletes, Shane Battier, who played for Duke, and Alex Smith, who was the quarterback for 49ers, and another guy, Ravi Gupta, who does investing and finance.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were talking about why the coach of the Miami Heat keeps having kind of late round draft picks who become stars. And everyone asked him, like, how do you develop all these players? And he's like, I let them play. Like, You don't only play the fully developed players, you play the developing players. And I think that's a decent answer where, again, it's very high stakes. There's millions of people watching your games. There's the tens of thousands paid money to sit there, and you can't put on a bad product. And owners fire you like that. And yet, the way you have sustained success, being one of the longest tenured coaches and keep producing stars, is you let young players play. So as a manager, are you letting your young players play? And if you're not, then maybe you're taking a shortcut and it's going to harm you in the long run.
Yeah. No, that's so true. That's so true. And at the same time, for any employee, right? They want to feel seen and valued and respected, and you hired them for a reason. And
Right.
so let them do the job without micromanaging or having, have the mentor mindset versus the command and control mindset with the people that you are lucky enough to lead. Let them and give them the opportunity to stumble so that they can learn from that as well. And don't create environments of fear where if I screw up, my leader or my manager is going to my brand is going to be hit or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing I learned from you when interviewing you for the book was, there's a version of let people stumble where you give them no guidance.
Yeah.
And then they do a very high stakes presentation.
Yeah.
And then it bombs.
Right.
That's not the right way to go. They need to give a low stakes version of the presentation or pitch and have it bomb privately with 3 people who are on their side and get the feedback and then fix it. And you told me the story, and I heard it from your direct report also, of a presentation to a skip boss. And before the young employee finishes the slide deck, there's a step of presenting it to someone who has presented to that skip boss before and knows what that skip boss is going to say.
Right.
And so you bomb in that small environment, so that way you kill it in the high stakes environment.
Right. And you're right there with the person. So they may be nervous, but they know that you're not going to let them, completely bomb. You're going to be right there to support them and then learn from what tripped them up or whatever, and then set them up for success for the next one. That's the only way that you learn. Like you said, let them play. It's the only way you learn. How else is somebody going to learn how to present effectively to leadership unless they present to leadership or get the opportunities, not in that example. Okay. So we talked a little bit about AI, and I'm just curious. So what has your research shown about how young people respond to challenge and uncertainty and the crazy, insane, rapid changes happening right now? And how might that inform how we lead them through AI-driven transitions with a mentor mindset? Because things are bonkers right now. It's nutty.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a narrative that if you use AI in a smart way, you can be super productive, and that only suckers do things in an analog or manual way. And that if you're a sucker, then you're going to get left behind. But if you're like a smart optimizer, then you'll, get it ahead. And, it is the case that, if I was a manager, here's a real example in my field. So we do data science.
Yeah.
So if you run a study or a survey and you need to present the results in data visualization, and I know how much I pay you and, your annual salary, as a proportion of a week. And if you tell me I spent a week reading forums on how to create this one figure, and here's the one figure I created, but I know that Claude could have done that in 10 minutes. And I'm like, you wasted a week's worth of grant money that I had to raise to pay for your salary. That's not efficient. And in a business, same kind of thing, right? How many units did we have to sell in order to pay for your inefficiency? So I totally get that kind of argument. At the same time, my worry is that certain inefficiencies are actually how you learn how to think. And by going down dead ends, then you actually sometimes learn the roads you should have taken. And the hyper optimizers are nuts sometimes. Yeah. It's what is the point of what you're doing? And Like, what are you going to do with all this free time? Like, I remember I was on this podcast, I won't name it, but it's all about like optimization of health and performance. Like every hack for your neurons and your emotions and your sleep and sunlight and everything. And I just remember saying off camera, like, it seems like most of what you're trying to do is to help people do more work. And I was like, I don't need to do more. Like, I need to, I need to do less work. Like the main reason I drink is because I need to stop writing papers at 7 o'clock. I don't need, the world doesn't need me to write 10 more academic papers than I already write in a year.
Yeah.
And like, I gotta think about something else. And like, this just doesn't make any sense to me. And so like, there's a diminishing return on like this culture of maximization. And young people are really stuck in that because they're turning to Instagram and LinkedIn for hacks.
Bruh.
And then they see people are at our level saying, here's the hack and no one's doing it. I'm not going to hire anyone who doesn't do this hack.
Right.
And it's a lie. Because what an employer really wants is a reliable person who will do whatever it takes to do the job.
Yeah.
Not that they will relentlessly outsource everything to a robot.
Right. Right. What you said, I've read so many articles recently about the fact that so AI is supposed to lift the work off of your plate so you can focus on the things that are most important, which from a leader perspective, I absolutely get that. And I want to talk about your Mentor Mindset AI app that we mentioned a little bit earlier and how that can help leaders do those kinds of things. But the reality is what people are finding and what research I'm reading about is that AI might lift this thing so that it can add more to your plate, right? So then it's not making you maybe more efficient. It's just making it so you can take on even more and more, which is burning people out and stressing people out. So it's an interesting.
I know there's a whole like macroeconomics analysis that I feel like is missing.
Yeah.
Right. So like, how much money are we spending on people who are required to evaluate AI products for potential contracts with your company? Like you have 4 vendors and you have 4 bids, and now as I have to evaluate all of them, and I'm going to do a trial for each one.
Yep.
That's 3 months.
Yep.
And then I pick one.
Yep.
But then the technology changes in a year, and I have to do that again. And on top of that, now that I'm taking things that maybe were more analog, and I've put them on an AI server, then I have a new security risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I need new lawyers involved in new negotiations for like new insurance policies for, risk of data breach. I have to train a whole bunch of people on new ways of interacting or not interacting with the AI to avoid data breach, right? And then maybe I do have a data breach, and now like everybody's life is ruined.
Right.
So like, how much time are you really saving, and how much money are you really saving after all that? And that's at the current cost of tokens being cheap. But everybody knows, as soon as everybody's using AI all the time and we've forgotten all those analog muscles for how to do everything else, they're going to triple the price of the tokens.
Yeah.
Right. That's what happened with Uber. Yeah. Right. It's like, as soon as they got rid of all the taxis, like, Uber should be 3x.
Yeah.
And that's not even surge. Now we're going to have surge pricing too. And so like, that's 100% going to happen with AI, is like, as soon as you crowd out conventional businesses, then they're going to triple the cost of all the tokens. And that's even after all the externality costs. So and that's even before you take into account the fact that there's all kinds of super unsafe stuff happening on the models. And I can't disclose who I did this for, but we had a whole consulting project last year for one of the major models where the idea was, let's find the risk in social and emotional uses. And the stuff that, not to pick on any one model, all the models get wrong, it's unbelievable. Yeah. Like if you put into the model like a just regular off the shelf chat, like I'm in this argument with my husband and I really don't feel like he's listening to me, then the model will like word vomit. No one appreciates you. You're the most important person. Your husband, it's borderline abuse. You should probably call the police. You have to get out of there and move in with your sister. And by the way, you can always talk to me. I'm the only one who will listen to you. I'm always here for you. No one else understands you except me. But also don't tell anyone that we're having this conversation. So please keep it a secret. So like blowing out of proportion, lying about how trustworthy the model is, and then swearing you to secrecy. So that 3-step thing, all the models, and not all the time, but like 40% of the time.
Wow.
And so like all the costs I've already talked about are not even talking about lawsuits.
Yeah.
And class action lawsuits are coming. And so I think it's lunacy that we have just thrown so much money at this stuff without anybody thinking, is it actually good?
Yeah. No, I agree. And that's why it is the craziest race to win, and to win it at all costs and on all aspects with regard to AI. And I stand firm in belief, and that's why I created the consulting company I did, Luminary Leadership Consulting, because I genuinely will always believe that the future of leadership is human. You've got to always have that human centered side of things. And I love back to what you pitched for Satya. And now maybe we can talk about your mentor mindset
So,
AI tool a little bit.
because I do believe
Yeah.
that there are uses for AI that empower us to be better humans. And the difference between the ones that I favor and the ones I don't is that we're not like fully delegating our thinking and rationality to a model, right? Like the models have the veneer of sound advice because it sounds grammatical and it sounds like the kinds of things that you would hear from a casual friend. That's because the models are trained on the average of machine readable text, which is like Reddit and Vanity Fair articles about relationships or whatever. And it's like not expertise in the way that we would typically think of it. But in the scenarios where you can identify language that does count as expertise, then you can train models to mimic 95% of that, depending on the context. And there's a very brief example. I worked with a high schooler who had a startup, or has a startup still. She goes to the school called Alpha School. It's like you do kind of your regular learning in the morning. In the afternoon, you start a business.
Wow.
Anyway, her business was a dating coach for teenagers, and she trained the AI based on what like relationship scientists say. So like she found the science of good relationships, and then wrote strong guardrails and constraints around that. And then we tested it, and it actually gave better advice than moms.
Wow. What?
We got a bunch of moms to talk to teenagers about, we're texting, and all of a sudden he's not texting me anymore. And moms are like, put it in perspective, like get a life. And teenagers hate that. And then ChatGPT is like the same thing. No one appreciates you. Like you're the best. And this is borderline abuse. You should turn the kid into the principal or whatever, and like the correct one, like challenges the kid's thinking, which most users of AI don't want because they want affirmation. But what they need is challenging your thinking. So that's an example where fine tuning with expertise can work. And then the example I've created is at McDonald's, where we had managers. This isn't corporate McDonald's; these are just like local restaurants.
Right.
We had managers tell us how they would deal with 3 common conflict scenarios. And so across many managers, we're getting a lot of different conflict scenarios. So like people show up at work and then go hide in the bathroom is a big issue. They show up at McDonald's and they're wearing jewelry and they're not allowed to because it could get caught on the fryer or it could fall in the fries or whatever. Mm-hmm. They don't refill the milkshake machine, and then you get to rush hour, and then the drive-through slow because the milkshakes aren't frozen, and then their numbers are down. Someone's rude to a customer, but it's because the customer yelled at them for no reason. So like customers these days feel like they can yell at every service employee. It's the number one issue at Walmart, by the way. But so it happens at McDonald's. People order wrong, and then they yell at the person on the front desk for ordering the customer ordered wrong. And then the person at the front desk just defends themselves, and then they get yelled at by their boss. So these are conflict scenarios. So we went and got the managers that were, not the equivalent of you, but the like paradigm of you, like, bright spots within McDonald's, said how would you have answered this scenario? And then Carol Dweck and I personally edited their answers. And so you take the wisdom of practice plus science of mindsets. And then we wrote super answers for all of these common conflicts based on a combination of the
Wow.
science and the wisdom of practice. And then we trained a new model that has tight guardrails. It'll only talk about certain things, not about whatever, but it's reflecting the training data that we added. And now managers, we have, I don't know, 200, 300 managers using it in these stores. This is like 4,000 employees and the crew members. And before you go yell at someone for being late or for hiding in the bathroom, you look at Yeager in your pocket
Yeah.
and you're like, hey, what should I say to this person? And then the AI will think, and then it gives you a suggestion.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I love that because it's tailored to include like what the company needs you to follow from the safeguards and the values of the company, as well as the science-based human perspective, not just a bunch of, like you said, AI vomit of randomness. It's very tailored. I think that that's really important because that does then lift you to be a better leader in the role that you're in at the time or whatever
Yeah.
company you're at. I think that that's really, really,
Yeah. Like our hope is that, you don't have to ask it every time, that, if you do it enough, then eventually
yeah.
you're going to know what to say.
Right. No, that's exactly right. It's that practice, right? That makes it sticky.
And by the way, the reason we're in service is because the turnover rate is 150%. I
Wow.
don't know if
Yeah.
I said that, but which means for every 100 jobs at McDonald's, the employer has to hire 150 people a year to do those jobs.
So that's
Okay.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be 0%, but it could at
shouldn't
least be
that high.
100.
Yeah.
There's no reason it should be over 100, you know?
Yeah. No.
But I talked to the people at Chili's, yeah, it's pretty bad here too. So it's across the sector, turnover's terrible. And the number one reason why people are terminated is not that they're fired. It's people quit. And they quit because they feel yelled at by their managers for the most part.
Wow.
And so if you don't get these conversations right, you might avoid, and then you finally say something, and then but in your mind, you've been mad for 2 months.
Right.
And now it comes across as disproportionate anger compared to the recipient of the feedback.
Right.
It's where is this anger?
I had no clue. Yeah. They had no idea it was coming. And that's where I feel like the kind of feedback you need to give needs to be consistent and often, because then it's based in building trust with that person or with the people that you're lucky enough to lead, because then it doesn't come off as being anger or, you did something wrong or this finger pointing kind of thing. There's something wrong with you. It comes across as, I trust this person who's giving me this feedback because they just want what's best for me.
Yeah.
Human-centered leadership and, the mentor mindset is, I just want to double down on that with one more question. It's so important, especially now. And I know that, so you study how humans learn and struggle and change. And what does human-centered leadership mean to you through that lens?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to something that one of my friends, Rosalind Wiseman, always says. She's
Love her.
Speaker. She wrote a book called Queen Bees and Wannabes, which became the movie Mean Girls.
Right.
But at the center of her work is this feeling of dignity and respect. And the simplest way to define dignity is I afford you personhood. I allow you to be an actual human being in all that complexity. And, there are trivial versions of that where, as a manager, I don't have any standards for you because I don't want to interfere with your authenticity. And your authenticity is that you suck at your job. So who am I to tell you to not suck at your job? There's a version of you could read Harvard Business Review articles on authentic leadership and human-centered and come away with the impression that it's all just being a wimp and giving someone a comfort llama or whatever. But then your unit would be underperforming. There's no standards. You can't do anything, And so I think that the part of being a human is not just being cared for. That's absolutely critical.
Yeah.
It's having the opportunity to do meaningful stuff that, if in a world in which we were just paid and we didn't do any work, people would still work. They'd find hard things to do, And so are we allowing people to have both of the needs met, the need for competence, the need to do impressive, important stuff publicly in the eyes of people whose opinions I care about? Can I make a name for myself here? Can I tell a story to my kids and grandkids about impressive stuff I did?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like that's, and then the support need, right? Did I support them so that they could actually do it rather than feel a sense of failure and humiliation that they were never able to accomplish anything of
Right.
worth?
Right. I will always believe that if you treat others with kindness and really approach being a leader from that human grounded perspective of these are other humans that I'm working with. These aren't just employees that I need to manage. Um, it's amazing the feeling of lifting others up from that perspective and watching them go be something that they didn't even maybe realize they could do. And you can do that only
Yeah.
when you are human, when you come at them from a human perspective and really pay attention to what their passions are, whether they're telling it you through words or nonverbal. Like pay attention.
Yeah. I sometimes call it like dignity forward or respect forward
Yeah.
kind of leadership. It's not like people who are doing it wrong or like always disrespectful, but it's like,
Yeah.
what are you prioritizing? And just to end, when we were doing the McDonald's project, I talked to the managers, I talked to Carol, but I was like, I had to talk to someone at HR who has clearly dealt with these issues before. And I ended up through my wife's aunt's friend talking to a woman who was the head of HR at Masterclass, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Mel Steinbach is her name. And previously, she was really high up in HR at McDonald's. And I was like, let me walk you through some of these conflict scenarios that I'm hearing emerging in the restaurants. And I'm just curious what you would say as a career HR person. And one of the scenarios was an employee is ambushed by a customer who says the employee got the order wrong. And now the customer's berating the employee, and then the employee is trying to cling to some semblance of dignity. And they're like, I did not get the order wrong. It's not my fault. And then the customer yells and yells, and then the manager has to step in. So the question is, what should the manager say in that scenario? And this is one of the most common things that happens. And the first thing Mel said was, it's like, well, first I would ask, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like that was the first thing,
Yeah.
And that did not come up once when I asked dozens of other managers what no one was like, first check if they're okay.
Right.
Instead, they were like, it's very important to treat every customer in this way. Like if you treat them poorly, we're going to get a comment thing in the comment box. We get it in the comment box. It's going to go to corporate. Corporate's going to ask us to investigate. It's going to be a whole thing, and you're going to look bad, and we're going to look bad. And so don't do that. You just got to let them tell you what they want, get it off their chest, and then you give them a free hamburger. And that's what all the managers said you should do. And Mel was like, ask them if they're okay.
Right.
And that's an example of human-centered leadership and dignity-forward leadership.
I love that so much because the person is already like panicked. They want to do the right thing. So I think everybody genuinely wants to do the right thing, and having a leader beside you to make sure you're okay in that situation.
Yeah. And I think leaders want to do the right thing too, but sometimes we need a script. We need something that's kind of easy to recall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think hopefully the mentor mindset framework and then the work that you're doing and you're advancing just makes it a little easier for people to do the right thing.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay. So the last question that I leave every podcast with is I created a game called Am I the Problem? That's the name of the game. It's coming out soon, but we're going to end every podcast with a question that I've pulled from that game. And so yours is, as you reflect on being a leader, a professor, a mentor in academia, and a coach. We didn't get to talk about you being a baseball coach because you're also that and doing amazing, amazing things for youth baseball, which I am a huge supporter of. How do you recognize when you are leading from ego instead of empathy and or care? Maybe you don't do that.
I'd say it's mainly when what I'm mad about is the effect that their behavior had on me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's mainly, I would say, with my kids, like my kids' behavior getting out of control means that when they were younger, I was really worried about this, that you just look in public like a terrible parent because you can't, they're like all these strangers, like you can't control your own child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it wasn't just my imagination. I distinctly remember when one of my sons was, I don't know, 6, and he was an ADHD maniac. So I would just take him to the jumpy house and let him run amok. Inevitably, he would bother some other kid, and then like some dad in like sleeveless shirt came over and wanted to fight me. He's like, "You see what your son did to my daughter? He took her toy and ran away." I'm like, "Yeah, that's why he's at a playground." I mean, yeah, you shouldn't do that, but like, you don't. And so what I literally said to the guy was like, "You don't think I've noticed that he does that?" And I was like, "The version of him that you're seeing is the best possible version of my, like, that's the version after 3 years of therapy and medication and like me in therapy and him in therapy. Like,
Yeah.
that's the best possible version of his behavior that you'll ever see. And so I don't really know what to tell you, but like, I'm at a loss. And do you have advice for me?"
Yeah.
And the guy, there was like, "Just control your kid," and walked away.
Yeah.
But like, so I have legitimate fear sometimes that other parents perceive me as being a crappy parent because of my kid's behavior. And then I get extra mad.
Yeah.
And so then I realize that my parenting is more about my ego and how
Yeah.
I look and not about what the kids need.
Yeah. I love that story because we're all of us who are parents have been there. It's difficult. And you know, if you could put your kids first and understanding them and what the situation is over, oh my gosh, this person is judging me, and that matters
Yeah.
more than how I'm reacting to my child. That takes a lot of self-awareness, especially in the moment. So kudos to you. Gosh, this has been a great conversation, and I can't thank you enough for bringing your clarity and your humility and your deep belief in human potential into this room. You reminded us that the years between 10 and 25 are not a waiting room for adulthood. They're the forge where identity, purpose, and possibility take shape. And every adult who crosses a young person's path becomes part of that shaping. Whether we mean it or we mean to or not. And your work calls leaders of teams, of classrooms, of families to show up with more intention, more respect, and more courage. To stop underestimating young people for sure, and to start rising to meet them, and to hold standards high and the support high at the same time, because that's what belief looks like in practice. And thank you for widening our understanding of what it means to lead humans who are still becoming, and for reminding us all that we are all also in some way still becoming. So to everyone listening, take a moment, carry what you've heard today into the next conversation you have with someone younger than you, and let it change the way you see them. Let it change the way you lead. And remember, self-reckoning isn't about getting it perfect. It's about staying awake to who you are becoming. And so until next time, keep the lantern lit, keep doing the real work, and light your lantern and the lantern for those around you. So thank you. Thank you, David.
Thanks for having me.